Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today, as part of our peace treaties topic, we'll be looking at the Russian Revolution, and in the next video, we will be looking at the consequences of said revolution. So let's set the scene. Imagine Russia, but not modern Russia, with cars and modern agriculture. Imagine it like the medieval version, where there are many small villages, very remote, and yet there are also massive cities with great palaces and churches. Only, imagine it with railways as well, and period weapons like rifles. And imagine yourself to be a peasant farmer. This was what it was like for most people's lives in 1917 Russia. Pretty bad. Now, imagine yourself working from sun-up to sundown for 3 days straight or longer. And after many, many hours of this back-breaking labour, you have just brought in the harvest. But you're not keeping any of it practically. You've got maybe enough to keep you going through the winter, if you're lucky, and if you ration it. But most of it has been taken by the landlord, who will then sell it for a profit and give you less than a quarter of it. Not only that, but your own beloved son has been forced into fighting the war, and the letters he has written back are not good. He speaks of rarity of food and drink, and how he has no gun. He also speaks of how the Tsar has led them into death. This was what life was like for most Russian people at the time. It's not a pretty image, is it? Now imagine what it must have been like to hear that a revolution was brewing. It must have been a dream. Something that you could only imagine happening once in a blue moon. Something that would change your life. A time to get equal rights. That's what most Russians thought that the revolution would be. A chance for them to get the rights they deserved, and yet still keep things the way they're going. Or at least, that's what some people thought. Others saw it as a time for hard-line revolution, and a chance to get rid of the Russian monarchy. So, let's begin. In 1917, the Kaiser of Germany, Wilhelm II, has Lenin sent off by train from his exile in Switzerland back to Russia. Now he was a hardline communist, and a strong believer in Marxism, aka communism. And he wanted the Tsar gone. He hated him, because he was the one who had him exiled. After all, he had spoken out against the Tsar one too many times. And also, he was a communist, which was extremely anti-monarchy. And many other people hated him. And this was due to quite a few things. But we can narrow it down to some main reasons. And one of them was the fact that Russia was extremely backwards. At the time of 1917, it had less rail networks than the UK. And that is quite something, because if you look at Russia today, its rail networks are some of the biggest in the world. Not only that, but they still had a feudal system, with the king at the top and the peasants at the bottom. Not good for the people. And it was basically the Middle Ages still in Russia, and so the people hated him. Another reason for the bad atmosphere was that they had been suffering from many economic and military problems. You see, even before the War of 1914 and 1918, Russia had lost a disastrous war with the Japanese, which resulted in much of the Russian fleet in Asia being destroyed. And for a country to lose a war against such a small nation, that is quite something. Now, as well as that, many basic goods were no longer accessible for the Russian people, most notably vodka. And why was vodka no longer available? Because potatoes were no longer available. They were either rotting away or being sent to the front. And if you had no potatoes, you couldn't have vodka. And without vodka, many people weren't happy, as vodka was a way for you to escape the misery. But, in the Tsar's defence, it was not his fault entirely. You see, his son had a disease where his blood could not clot properly, and, at the time, the doctors of his son wanted to give him aspirin. Now, many people here will know that aspirin is a blood thinner, not something you want to give to someone whose blood cannot even clot properly, meaning that if you were to get a wound, you would just bleed out. And, funnily enough, at the exact same ideal time, a man with less than ideal morals was rising in Russia's Orthodox Church system, and his name was Rasputin. And when Rasputin visited the Tsar's son, he told the doctors not to give him aspirin, for it would kill him. And he was right. Now, with his son saved, the Tsar believed that Rasputin was the way to go in life. And, lo and behold, Rasputin became very important, especially with what was about to happen. You see, the Tsar had decided to go to war. With the war already happening, he had decided to fight in it and become the supreme military general. At the time, his generals were doing things their own way, and although not going great, they had some successes, like the Brusilov offensive, which we will look at soon. But when the Tsar came, it went terribly. He was an incapable leader, and he didn't know what he was doing. But with the Tsar gone, his wife had to make sure that someone could control things like railways and the people. And so who else to put in charge but her son's saviour, Rasputin. But you see, there was one major problem. Rasputin didn't want this job. He had no interest in it. And so he gave it off to his friends. However, his friends didn't want it either. And so, many things like great carts, railway carts, full of vegetables, meat, livestock, were left to rot, left to be dead, and in fact looted by people if they were in the wilderness. And with that, the Russian people couldn't get anything. And, of course, things like potatoes were rotting away in railway carts, and a rotten potato can't be used to make vodka. Another reason they were angry was that the Tsar's wife was German, aka an enemy, since they were fighting Germany. So, with the Kaiser throwing Lenin onto the bonfire that was the Russian monarchy, it just about sealed everyone's fate in Russia. And this, of course, was the Kaiser's plan all along. And with that, the revolution began. It started quite small at first, with small public speaking and small demonstrations, very similar to how many revolutions begin. But of course, the soldiers soon heard. And when the soldiers heard of such a revolution, they joined in. And with the soldiers joining in, a great army was created, one that would become the symbol of Soviet power, the Red Army. And they were fighting the White Monarchist Army across the country. But the White Army had support from countries like Britain and America and France, for they sent tanks and soldiers to help the Russian monarchy. Why? Because if Russia fell to communism, they knew that not only their monarchies would be in threat, or at least Britain's, but also Russia might leave the war. And if they left the war, Germany could withdraw all troops from the Russian front and pump them into the Western front. But Britain, France and America weren't dedicated. And as soon as things started to go wrong, they withdrew everything. But the Russians still captured some tanks, which helped them with their own tank designs later on. And sooner than expected, the Reds came knocking at the door for the Tsar, and he was captured along with his family by the Reds. And he was held in a small hotel building. The royal family in Britain did have a chance to bring him home, but chose not to in fear that revolution might follow. But, luckily for the Russian royal family, the White Army was closing in on their location, hoping to rescue them. However, it was too late for the White Army. The Red Army, fearing the worst, shot every single member of the Russian royal family, including all the servants. Not even the children were saved. And with the Russian royal family destroyed, all hope and resistance to the new communist state that was Russia slinked away. I hope you found this video helpful. I hope that it has helped you understand what the revolution was and its causes. Although not many facts were brought up, this is meant to really help you understand what would happen next, which is the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. So hopefully you found this video informative. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.